the recording again. So we are officially starting the second part of our second day session of Solidarity Conference. We will have 5 lectures in a row, so 5 conversations. So, and these will be also a change from the previous topics. So there will be first 2 conversations or 2 presentations more connected to the role of education. Then there will be 1 presentation by an artist and art historian, dealing with her own work a few years ago. And then the last 2 presentations will be more, in a sense, philosophically oriented. But so let me just now begin with Ali Esquembre, who is now at, he's doing research in theoretical physics associated with the University of Sarajevo, and also at the Foundation Memorial for Alija Kučukalić. He will speak to us about 3 axioms for education to understand the future after the COVID-19 crisis. So please, Ali.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just share the screen. I don't know if you can go to the other Ali and you might see the screen here. Is it? Okay,
yes,
great.
That's fine.
Great, thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay.
Great, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here. I am really happy and I am really optimistic about the outcome of this whole activity. Hopefully it will have a really important impact in the future, hopefully. I am a young theoretical physicist who is just starting his research career. And I think that as a young physicist, I can give a new perspective of what is the future of how we are educated in science or education in general. And let me just start with a little bit of what is going to be the outcome on, or what I'm going to say here. I will start by sharing with you my full experience in the educational system and applying the methods I learned from theoretical physics to my experience, so that I can, and this is related with the previous talks, I will try to make a model of education based on everything I have observed so far. So the first part is going to be a resume of my observations on what has been for me education and my experience teaching. And I will sum up all my observation in 3 axioms from which I can predict, or the prediction that you get from these axioms are satisfied with my observations, and I can predict something that might happen after all the situation. So let's get started. Why did I choose this topic? Is because I had experience to be a teacher in the COVID-19 times. And the things I observed are really interesting. And one of the main things I have observed is a confirmation that the role of the teacher is something that we have to change. It doesn't work anymore in this way. So let's go 6 years ago, back in time. And let's go when I was at the high school, and I have been always a very curious person. And as a curious person, I use the internet as a tool to satisfy my curiosity. And also, I have to say that for me, the internet has been my main academic teacher. How can I start this? I remember when I was taking chemistry at the high school, and it was really impossible for me to understand what the teacher was saying. So I went to the internet and I found some random YouTube channel from where I learned everything to pass the exams. So at the end, the YouTube channel was my teacher. And for me, the high school was only the place in which I learned what have I had to learn. So I went to the high school. They told me, okay, you had to learn this. And then I learned everything from the internet. And this is for me the first problem of education, that the school is not the place to learn a subject. And we are always using things out of the school. How do I know that this is something common? Because YouTube channels of education are very popular and people is getting money from them. So a lot of people are using these tools. So I was lucky enough that for me it was easy to learn. So I had a lot of free time during my education. So I used this free time to learn different things. And I was really interested into programming, and I started learning how to code in C++ language. So I found some PDFs on the internet and I started reading them. But after a year with those PDFs, I didn't know how to program at all. Why? Because I didn't study them properly. So I just was studying the PDFs like if I was studying for the exam in high school, but not programming at all, not learning. So I realized something. The school didn't give me the abilities to learn something. They just gave me the abilities to learn for the exams. And that was something really frustrating, because even though I had time for learning things I was interested in, it was impossible to learn them fine. So the question I wrote down here, which is why can't I learn anything further if I already know well enough everything I'm supposed to know? This question is something that was or has been with me till I finished university. So then I went to the university, and in the university, the internet was something not so useful, because the topics I had to learn when I studied physics were very, very specific, and it was harder to find them on the internet. But it was fine that the library of the university was very good. So I read almost all the books in the library, and I spent a lot of time finding the good books to understand what the teacher were explaining at the lessons. So this had a really good thing, that when I had to study some topics, let's say Lagrangian mechanics, thermodynamics, or in general the topics we learned in physics, I had a really strong knowledge of them because I read many, many books on them. But I didn't practice for the exams. So when I went to the exam and I had to solve a problem, I knew how to solve the problem. But since I didn't practice to solve the problem within 3 hours, I didn't solve it in the exam, so my marks were not good, even though I knew the subject. So this is, for me, what I call the third problem of education, that the exams or the evaluation system hardly ever show the real knowledge of the students. So this is something, let's say, very, very unfair. But okay, I got a really, really good ability, which was to find good bibliography. And I was really experienced on finding bibliography, both on the internet and in books. So when it arrived the time of my bachelor thesis, I proposed the topic. And I was aware of the topic because of all the conversation I had on forums on the internet and all the books I read. I knew which were the open questions on physics on the time. So I could propose something related to the time. It was something, I had to say, very uncommon, because usually students got the topics from the teachers, but I proposed my topic, which was quantum computational complexity theory. And it was a really good job, made on 9.8 out of 10 mark. The 0.2 missing was because I forgot to do it in English, the abstract, but okay. And one question I got from one of the teachers in the tribunal was, where did I get so many information from? And it was approved that it was very, very uncommon for students being aware of the state of the art or being aware of what to learn. I was one of the few, because of how I learned, that showed a really interest in the state of the art of physics. So I learned that that was the only occasion in which I was able to show my real abilities. And it was sad, because students usually are not given the opportunity to show their real abilities. This is the fourth form of education. After that, I traveled around Europe, and I decided to move abroad to study my master's. And my master's was in theoretical physics, and here I had to say that I was very happy, because the master was really, really focused on the state-of-the-art problems. We talk about atom science, a lot about laser atoms interactions, and my abilities acquired by learning about bibliography and searching bibliography were really useful here, and I was really happy. So I realized something, how sad it is that rarely institutions are aware of the real state-of-the-art problems, or how to say, I was sad that I had to wait in my master's to learn about the state-of-the-art problems on the university. So for me, this is something I call the fifth problem of education, that it is very, very uncommon to have real problems. We have got some kind of academic problems, but not related with the real thing. Now, let's say, suppose how useful it would be to have 100 students working on open problems, because students have good ideas. Then, when I finished my master's, I had the opportunity to work as a physics teacher at a primary school. And I decided that to be my opportunity to avoid making the same errors that I found when I was a student. So when I started learning or thinking about how to do my own education, I based my teaching on these 3 points. The first point is that children are clever. They can understand higher level ideas if I am good enough to show them clear enough. So I took the topics I had to teach and I moved the topics into the current state of those topics. So for example, if we had to talk about atoms, I moved that to the interaction with laser and atoms and high energy physics, and everything done in an easy way, so that, and they understood it. The second point of my methodology was that nowadays children have got access to all the information they need. So my role was not to teach them those information. My role was just to tell them where to find the information and how to identify the correct and the wrong information. And finally, the children are interested in their own things. So my role is that they will not be interested in physics unless I show them that physics is useful for their own goals. So now the question is how to apply these 3 points on the real education. So the first point, the point that children are clever, is something I applied through writing a book. So I took the study program I had to teach and I wrote a book with that study program to a higher level. Even though they didn't understand, doesn't mind, because they will understand with time. So in the book, I put a lot of things of the state of the art of physics and technology, and the work of the students was a very simple one. They only had to read the book and write as much question as possible they had. The more questions, the better, because I was sure they didn't understand everything. But the point is that you had not understand something so that you can understand something. And in the lessons, we would make question and answer sessions. And they, by their own, with my guide, would reach the conclusions because they were clever enough for that. In some, and for example, we even reached the conclusions of Newton. The second law of Newton was something so easy if we thought about that. And I didn't have to, okay, this is this. They just found the answer. The second principle, or the second principle of education, which was that children have got access to all the education, I applied that by making them do activities or research. So I gave them open questions of physics nowadays, or mathematics, the PMP problem, the question of quantum gravity, and the question of gauge invariance in some theories, but in such a way. And I told them, okay, make research on this thing, but don't write about anything unless you understand that. If that's only one phrase, I want your research to be one phrase, but that thing. And my role was only to teach them, okay, look, these web pages, these are good references, and so on. And finally, how to make them interested about the subject is something I made by cooperation. I tried to be one of them. So I gave to all them my telephone number. I was even playing video games with them sometimes, recording TikTok videos, being on their Instagram, all the life they have got, I was there. So that I was a friend, and in that way, I was learning what they were interested about. So when I was preparing my lessons, I was focusing my lessons on how to help them achieve their own goals. So I had to be inside their lives as a friend, not as a teacher. Okay, maybe these 3 points seem something ideal, and in fact, reality was something very different. When I applied all of them, this is what I found. The first thing is that I was the only one who thought children were clever. The other teachers were criticizing, okay, this is so very difficult for them. The parents were like, I mean, the subject is being very difficult for my children. I'm seeing him that is not comfortable studying, is struggling a lot, and the students were not studying at all. So it was a problem of the conception of the children, because children were said that they are not clever. So they were said that studying is something easy, Therefore, they didn't study when it was hard. About the research, the most curious thing I found is that they mixed quality with quantity. And whenever I told them your work is bad, they was like, how can it be bad? Look how much I wrote. Yes, but you don't understand anything you wrote down. And this is something I didn't expect. And the final thing, what are the goals of children? They had no goals for the future. They only want to be in the hotspot, being the person with the most number of followers, being the most famous person, and in general, shining in the given world instead of creating a new world. Is that I am given the world of Instagram. I want to shine in the world of Instagram. But none of them were thinking about, okay, let's create the new Instagram, the new social media. Let's make some entrepreneur. So after all of these observations, I thought to write them down in 3 axioms. From those axioms, we can get the same conclusions that I observed, and we can predict more. And which are those axioms? For me, I think that the current education is based on these 3 points. And if we want to change education, we have to change these points. We have to base them in different ones, which are the first one, that children's capabilities are underestimated. It is a common thought that children are not so clever than they are. The second thing is that quantity is preferred over quality, and this is something we can see everywhere. How much we produce without even being useful, how many clothing, how many cars, and we don't need all of them. It's more of the same. And finally, the idea of success. Nowadays, children think that success means getting the most attention. And this is what it is. So from these 3 axioms, it is really easy to get the same conclusion that we observed. And something happened then, that the coronavirus showed up, and the old education had to move to the internet. And here in the internet, everything was very funny or very interesting. The first thing is that students adapt very fast, but it was a chaos for teachers. Many teachers didn't know what to do, but children were in their own territory. Because our generation is born in the internet. We lived in the internet. We are taught by the internet. But it was easy for me because I was born in the internet, but not all the teachers were on the internet from the very beginning. So now I had to make a change of my mindset in the following square that I have squared here. Since a school had entered into their own house, I had to make them feel a school as part of their life instead of as an intruder. But then there are 3 things to be mentioned. First of all is that the students are based towards the figure of the teacher. So it doesn't mind what you do, you are the teacher. You cannot be a friend of them. The second thing is that for many students, the online school just meant the end of the school, because they didn't realize that the school was something important. They just realized that the school is the place I go, not the place I learn. Since now I don't have to go to school, the school is over. And finally is that good students got even better because they didn't have the disturbation of all the colleagues that they're talking. They could focus more because it was something more face-to-face. And bad students, since it was easier for them not to listen, got even worse. Now let's say something. What does it mean to be a good student and a bad student? It depends on the current paradigm of education. This is based on the 3 axioms I wrote down before. A good student is said to be that student that listens to every indication of the teacher and does satisfy the expectations. And we say that there are bad students only because we have defined good students to be in this way. Bad students, or let's say those who cannot listen to the teacher, are not bad students. It's just that education is not made for them. And this situation, because of this conception, has made easier for good students to listen to the teacher. So good students were better, even though the better thing is not really better. Okay, so this is what happened after the coronavirus situation. We have got the bad students are worse and the good students are better. So from this fact, these are my predictions, which only might be true after the coronavirus situation and with our 3 axioms. The first prediction, also known as a theorem, as a mathematical way of seeing all of this, is that the number of scientists will be even smaller. We will come back to the proof later, not to lose many time on this. So the first prediction, the number of scientists in the world will be even smaller than nowadays. The second prediction that I can make from this educational model that we have got nowadays is that unemployment is gonna grow and grow and grow even more, just because education is made in this way. And the third prediction I can make is that the differences between the so-called first and third world countries is gonna be even bigger. This educational system is breaking the existence of second class, and is making the first class being even firster and the third class being even thirder. So if we want to avoid these 3 predictions, my proposal is the following one. Now we are in that moment. The coronavirus situation has break down completely what is education. And now is our work to change the axioms, to change our mindset, to create a new educational system which adapts to the current vision of the world, which is on the internet, and which avoids the bad conclusions that might happen if we continue in this way. This is everything I had to say. Thank you very much for listening, and I would really like to talk about this if you have got any questions.
Good. Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you very much for your extremely, mind-provoking lecture now and description of what is going on. I have a lot of things to say, but I want to, call for possible, reactions from the audience. Anyone?
Can I speak?
Of course.
Yeah.
Can I address? Yes. Well,
Yeah.
Ali, thank you very much for this Spinoza-like discussion of an everyday situation that you have been able to model in logical terms. I couldn't agree more with you. That is, I also think that we are now at the moment where we can change what is not good in the education of the moment. It is very interesting that your observations that you made in primary school, so therefore with very young students, agree with many observations I've made over the many years that I have been a university professor. I think that the students do behave in this way, and all the axioms that the conclusions are there, and I think I can see the proofs of your theorems. I can see that these axioms are there. And we often say at the university that it is nothing that we can change, because the children have already been fed these wrong assumptions from the very first day of their life in education. And that's a very difficult problem. I have fought a lot for something that some people might consider an elitistic education, which is, I think, that we have to have higher expectations on our students. And I do not think that this is elitistic. I just think the opposite. I think that this is the way to engage people and to have to give them confidence that they can do things. So I actually do not have a question for you, except perhaps a suggestion that you might, since you seem to have thought so much about it, write something about this that we could read. Many of us would be interested. And I will also read to you a question from Giselle, who is in many career directions that she has had. One of them, she is a founder of a school in Central African Republic, so she runs a school there. Well, she says that the difference in educational levels will become even worse with the new system. Well, so that's all I had to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wants to say something? Yes, Demetrius.
I've got some comments. Thank you very much. This was very very interesting, and just to verify maybe some of your axioms, I had to do a lot of things online, and one thing we do at Imperial after the exams finish, all second year students have to do a project. So you give them a project which is fairly new for them, and they have 10 days to do it in. And this is something we do every year in a team of 5 or something. Now, for the first time, I've done this, I don't know, 10 times already or something, 8 times. For the first time, I found that they engaged with it much more than before. I mean, maybe it's because they couldn't go out. You know, at university, after the exams, there's parties all the time and all these things. Mm-hmm. So, but I was really amazed this year what they managed to do. And in fact, they did numerical analysis that we don't teach until the 3rd and 4th year. You know, I gave them things to do. They went, found the books. Of course, they don't care that the library is closed. They can find the books and download them from all sorts of websites, right? In fact,
yes,
they showed me as well where you can do. So it really was quite an eye-opener. And now, if we were in the normal situation and I pushed them, it probably wouldn't have worked the same way. So I completely understand what you're saying, but so this was all a comment. My question was, your axioms, what age group do you think they apply to, all the way from primary to university?
I would say yes. I would say yes. I would say that the conception that children are not so clever is something that also happens in the university. Okay, the university has got more specific things, but always happens the thing that you can learn more than what they let you know. So, for example, yes. For example, in the university, the fact that you are not allowed to show your real knowledge in the exam is a fact that demotivates people to learn more. And this is a conclusion of the thing that they are not so clever. Since I don't think he is clever enough, I will not ask him difficult enough questions. Since he knows those questions are not going to be there, he's not going to learn the things he could learn. So this is the will in which go. If we think they are clever enough, then we will give them harder questions, and they will manage somehow to answer them. Maybe wrongly, maybe good, but somehow. Our thing is to provoke them how to work by their own. So I think the first action is true also in university. The second one, that quantity is preferred over quality, I think this depends a lot on where you work. In the field of physics, I don't think this axiom applies for the university, because I was taught in university that if I give an answer without explaining the answer, then it's not a good answer. So, but in the high school, it's something really, really general because of the copy-paste technique and so on. And the third axiom, that success means getting the most of the attention, I think is true in university. In the university, something true. Because usually those students that success are those students that have got good relation with teachers, because of how the university system works. You have got a good relation with the teacher, then it is easier that you will get a PhD with him or with her. So success means getting attention. So yeah, the answer for your question is that these axioms apply for the university also and for every level, And maybe the second one, that quantity is preferred over quality, depends on the field. In physics, it's not true, but on other fields, it might be true. I don't really know.
Mm-hmm. Do you see in your work with all the students and everything? Do you see any kind of newfound enthusiasm for science, given that what's going on now is being approached by a lot of people? I mean, that's all you see on the news all the time. Scientists here and there doing all these things. Could there be a moment where we save the the kind of the pessimistic conclusion that there will be less scientists? Could this help?
I mean,
or they just want to do TikTok videos and yeah.
I had 100 students, 120 students, and from those 120, only 5 were really interested in physics or in science in general. So it's a really small number. Those 5 were really interested, and we worked even more. We had some Zoom connection. Okay, they were interested in the state of the art. They had a lot of questions. A lot of them were really pseudo-scientific, but this is because the mainstream of internet is like that. But okay, they were interested. That's a good thing. For the rest, they didn't value science as it was. So, and I think it is because they try to avoid the struggling of science. We all as scientists know that it is difficult to understand ideas. It is not something you get in a moment. You have to work through them a lot of hours. Since that's something they do not know because they live in this society of everything fast and everything come on. I am pessimistic in this way.
Mm-hmm.
It is something, yeah.
There are 2 additional questions by people who have asked. Let me just mention in connection with what Dimitris was saying just a moment ago. You know, at university, this semester really, saw an enhancement of interest among some groups, and also a horizontalization. Like things became more horizontal in some sense. Many of the good students, in addition to all these things that you mentioned, like TikTok and so on, by engaging in common projects, many of them started following, our online seminars and so on. As an anecdote, I just want to mention that I see, yes, 1 or 2 of my students of my basic class who are now attending this very session, just because I said there is this session, it's a large class, whoever is interested, of course it's 2 out of 60 or something like that, but they are listening about all these, they are listening to all these people, from Imperial, from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, from and so on. And there is some kind of participation that was unthinkable just a few generations ago. But aside from that, let me give the voice to Esma Kučukalić, who says she has a small question. Esma?
Good evening. Sorry for my camera. It's broken, so I hope you hear me. So congratulations for these interesting speeches we can hear this evening. And I have just a short reflection for Ali, including some terms that we as a journalist used to like to use, like millennials. And I see him like a young professor belonging to this generation. And I feel that we have a great gap between our generation and yours. I would like to know if you feel like this, if you, the millennial generation, are leaving a gap not just in the educational field, but in this new post-COVID society that we are trying to observe in this conference.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the generational gap is something obvious. It exists, and some examples of how that exists. We are not so likely to go to meetings. We can do it on the internet, and we don't understand why so many meetings cannot be emails. Yes, because it is faster for us. And for example, the gap of YouTube, how a lot of people is demonizing YouTube. Like, I mean, you are losing your time on YouTube, but YouTube is a really good teacher. And that's something that before generations do not really understand. Okay, maybe the MIT does, because they have got their own lectures and some universities, but it's not something so common. Or, for example, the streaming apps. There are many streaming apps in which you can directly talk with scientists. And we are really, really more related with the world of science, or we can do it, than before. But whenever your parents see the youngest student on the internet, they say, what are you doing losing your time? No, I am talking with a teacher of the University of Cambridge. And that's something that is difficult to understand for the previous generations. So I think the generational gap is something that exists. And it will be something always, because when in the future generations, I will have a generational gap with them. I think that's something we cannot change at all.
Okay. One question by Carlos Cardona. Do you think that your theorems are also valid for the teaching of the humanities?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. In the field of humanities, there is an extra point that the unemployment is bigger because humanities are rarely used for technology. So I think the education also happens, yes, because a problem with humanity, as far as I see, is the lack of philosophy studying on the high school, or a wrong way to study philosophy. So yes, I would say they apply. Let's go one by one. For example, children's capabilities are underestimated. In social science, it happens because we don't teach them good literature or good philosophy. For example, I remember when I was at the high school, I wanted to read Marquez, and I approached the teacher, and she told me, you don't have to read that, it's very difficult for you. And I was, okay, but I want to read it, let me try. So that's something that happens.
So there is no generational gap. Exactly the same comment happened in my time.
Really?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so then something that it proved that axiom is real.
It's true.
The thing about the second axiom, that quantity is preferred over quality, that's something really true in social sciences, because how many long texts are written that they say nothing, they're just smoke, but they use really difficult words and difficult vocabulary and so on, but they're not saying anything. And that's something we all had to read in the high school. I had to read many bad books. And what does it mean, a bad book? There's no thing like a bad and a good book, but there are books that have got a lot of words and no content. And we had to read all of them. So thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that could have been only one book. Why I didn't read the method of the cloud? And instead I had to read some author that didn't give anything to societies. So it happens. And the third axiom of success equals getting the most of the attention, that's something that also happens in social sciences, because the fame of a social scientist is not directly related with the quality of his or her work nowadays, sadly enough. But how many good philosophers are there and we don't know about them? So yes, I would say they apply.
Andres, I have a question from Giselle. Actually, her previous question was not complete. So can I say it, or you perhaps were saying something? Yeah. Okay, so she says that she could herself notice many of the things that you mentioned because she was observing her son, who is 13 years old, going through this period. She noticed that the quantity of the teaching is often more important than the quality. The children want to learn better, she says in capital letters. They are open and capable, but they cannot really do it in this kind of educational models. The parents who can will look for this quality in giving them different sources of teaching, internet sites, activities outside of the school, group visits, etc. But it is up to the parents and not the teachers who actually are doing this. Well, it should be the teachers that should be doing this. And it is now the time to rethink this educational model, in which we could imagine an educational model where we had some hours for some basic knowledge and then more hours for people, for children going and researching on their own what they want to learn and following their own interests, where we could use sites such as TED, universities such as the College of France, etc.
So you want to say something about this, Ali?
Yes, it's a really interesting comment. Thank you very much. And I am happy to know that you are satisfied with my theory of education, with the same observation you have made than me. I can agree with you that it is the work of the teachers. It is common said that the problem of education is not only the teacher, but also the parents. But we have to know something. Not all the parents have got the formation of the teachers. So I can agree with you. Even the fact that the parents are important and they have to be aware, we have to give authority to the teacher again. And we have to respect the teacher. And that's something that is not so common. I have heard many times as a teacher that when the student got a bad mark, the parent came to me. Why did you give to my student a bad mark? And I was like, he got it. And the parent was like, yes, but you are the teacher. You have to teach him better marks. Okay, I am the teacher. So, but the student doesn't respect me as a teacher. And that's the work of the parents. So there is the two-side work. Parents have not the formation of the teachers, so they have to respect the teachers. Okay, you're the teacher, you know more than me in this field, I respect your opinion. But the parents have to teach something to the students. You as a student have to respect also the teacher. So my comment, or I would add to your comment, is that education has to be something together, but knowing which is the role of all the parts.
Okay, let me just say I take issue with two of your statements. Thank you very much for your answer. First of all, when you were deriving all the conclusions from your axioms, you used something that I think already in its wording is very problematic, which is, you used the so-called, you said so-called first world or first worlder, so-called third world. As somebody who lives in the so-called third world, I see the divide is not really, like that. The real divide is really between good places here and there and bad places here and there. Bad places in Spain or the United States, good places in Spain and the United States, good places in Colombia, bad places in many parts of the so-called. And I think keeping using this terminology is an effect of extremely, political decisions made decades ago. And we should use maybe periphery versus center, as was shown yesterday by Gendra. But I think it is dangerous to continue using this third world, first world narrative, even if it is. I know that you use the quote unquote, and I understand that you understand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Of that, and you use it as one of the theorems from the very problematic axioms that we want to break. It's just something I was taking issue with. Now, the quantity versus quality, you said in physics, it doesn't happen. But I think in physics and in science, in mathematics, if you look the number of publications these days, in the past 10 years, it's more than ever before. And I think it's very doubtful to say that quality of mathematics has been better in the past 10 years than since Archimedes or to now. Of course, there are very good things under, but with all this pressure for overpublication, I think the quantity over quality is certainly an issue, not in the teaching world necessarily, but in the research world. But of course, it seeps down to the teaching world at university level in an extremely dramatic way, and physics is one of the worst fields in that sense, even more than humanities, perhaps. Right? You know, but okay, I don't know if I think we are maybe. I don't know, maybe one quick last remark.
Okay, okay, yes. I totally agree with you. And I will make a comment of, I read in one book by Sabine Hossenfolder. She's a researcher in Frankfurt, I think. And he put in her book, Lost in Science, he mentioned something really interesting. I think she quoted somebody. You only have to look at the quality of papers before and the quality of papers nowadays. And we only remember those papers which are beautiful. And that's an interesting point. We remember the papers that are beautiful because they somehow give us, so the meaning of quality is the meaning of beauty in this point. But okay, just to answer, it is true that in physics we have got many publications, and some of them are awful and boring, and we don't understand what is going on. That's something true. But I will say something. It is not bad to publish a lot. The more you publish is better because you have got many ideas, and it's difficult to get that quality. I mean, and that's the problem we have got in modern physics nowadays. How many years we have been working in the standard model and without any new ideas. Or yes, a lot of new ideas, but any new conclusions or any new experiments, any new evidence. So it is good to have a lot of publications in physics, I think that. And so the problem is that if those publications are published, I respect the journals because those are the more quality ones. So how many papers are being written which have no quality? I think that the problem of quality versus quantity is something that happens more in education than in I mean, this fact being a problem is something from education and not from the real estate, because the more scientific publication we produce, the better. We have got more knowledge of something, even though it's maybe dispersed.